Okay, folks, the intention is to start on time, unlike most things in the Western Isles. Because we're going out live, we do want to start on time because people will be connecting throughout the world, hopefully. Ian, you'd be as well to come and sit down here. Fiona, especially if she's around. Come down here, Fiona. And Christopher as well, yes. We're going to start on time.
Very good. Welcome, man. Very good to see you. Like, you too. Yeah. How are you? All right, thanks. Yeah, thank you very much. This is.
Okay, we'll go.
Yeah, all set. Yeah, good.
Okay, thank you all for coming this Dreich day in South Lochs. Can I ask that people don't walk across the camera angle, please? Otherwise, you will be staring across the world. So, if we can limit movement around that side of the camera, please. Thank you very much. So, welcome to you all. Thank you for coming. We decided we should start on time in typical Hebridean style. Maybe not, but we will start now. Well, it's good to see so many of you here today, and I'm hoping we've got quite a lot of people online as well because we're streaming this over the internet, and we certainly appreciate your support. This is very much a once upon a time story. In 2018, I got this phone call from Ravenspoint telling me that there was a lady here asking about a wartime project that was based here in Loch Erisard. We met up and talked, and it became very clear that here was something that should have had much more recognition locally. There were no plaques or information anywhere. The project was top secret when it was based here in 1942 and 43, and unlike today, where almost nothing is secret, no one locally spoke of it, even long after the war, my own mother included, who must have seen so much of what was going on from a ringside seat, everything going on in the loch from her house just on the hillside up there. That lady was Penny Greenland, whose father was one of the Charioteers based here and who I had hoped to welcome here today. Unfortunately, the plane couldn't land last night and no space on this morning's flight either, although I did hear that even had she got on the flight this morning, that plane did not land either. So happily, she's probably still in Glasgow. I'm happy to say we have a stand-in at short notice who will read Penny's notes. Fiona Stokes lives across the road, and like Penny, comes from Suffolk, or at least just across the border. So now Fiona is our guest of honour today, so I'm pleased to introduce her now. Fiona.
Okay, so Penny says, I am so sorry not to be there. An event to celebrate the extraordinary work of the Charioteers, moving from loch to loch and then to many parts of Europe and back, and I can't even get to the island. What an irony. When I met Donnie 5 years ago, I discovered something that I hadn't thought about before. I'd always known that the charioteer training was top secret, tucked away in this remote place. But another layer of secrecy became apparent. This community was a big part of that secrecy. Of course, you looked after the men and boys who did this extraordinary thing by keeping it all completely secret too. When a bunch of wild young men with high spirits, huge hearts, and a pretty bottomless capacity for a wee dram on a Saturday night, I think, landed here for a few months, you kept them safe, even when they rampaged around your community in ways that might not always have been wholeheartedly appreciated at the time. When the war was over, the secrecy no longer necessary changed into a kind of privacy. The charioteers didn't talk about what they had done much, except between themselves, and then late in their lives to a succession of historians, authors and TV producers who turned up on their doorsteps wanting to tell the story of the charioteers, knowing there wasn't long left to get it. Dickie was always pretty cautious about what they wrote and why they wrote it, and super wary of the term hero. That was a word applied by other people. He said they had it to do. So I grew up knowing that the privacy was important, says Penny. At the same time, I know Dickie would have been tickled pink that this public event is happening, and were he still around, he would have delighted in yarning with you all, reminiscing about the bits he felt could be made public. And I think he would have felt happier about doing that here than almost anywhere else. So I'm going to make my way between those two poles, the public and the private. The first time I became aware that my dad was a human torpedo, I was about 6. I was taken aside, very privately and quietly, and told that soon there was going to be a story about my dad in a well-known children's magazine. And I wasn't to mention it, or to boast about it if someone mentioned it to me. Intriguing, what's this? I was given little context. To keep it low-key, I expect, so I created my own. What could a human torpedo be? I started with the outfit: knee-length black satin shorts, baggy, a white singlet, and a black satin skull cap to match. And I was totally sure that my dad was inserted into a huge black cannon and fired over the enemy lines, painted white on the ground, at the Germans, with the intention of flattening them one by one. Thus victory was assured. What a superhero, human torpedo man. It was decades later that I found out about what they had actually been up to, and especially about his time here. Over 2 whole days we consumed more whiskey than is good for a person, and he read me all the letters he'd written home to his parents while he was in the Royal Navy Reserves, 1940 to 1945. I have them all, an amazing personal history mirroring the history in books. He talked about each letter, filling in the missing bits, and there were lots because of the secrecy thing. The letters, which all started Dear Mother and Dad, were full of, I have nothing much to tell you. I can't think of what to say. I don't know how I will fill this page, at a time when there was so much to say and none of it was sayable. There was lots of talk about being dog-tired. No wonder, they were training at night in preparation for night raids, sleeping little, then training during the day, walking, running, orienteering, in preparation for the possible need to walk home to Blighty from whatever foreign territory they might be stranded in. And, whatever they admitted to themselves, they were also managing constantly high levels of adrenaline, fear, and whatever other emotions that arose as they popped out for some more work, and hard work at that. His first letter from Air Resort says, everyone here is very happy and fit, and with lots of sun. I'm getting pretty brown. Then there's a short letter written at 0300. Just finished work and feeling pretty good, as I had the foresight to put a couple of gins on one side for just such an awful hour as this. Pleased to say, don't have to get up for breakfast. But the thing that really rings out from his letters is how this wild bunch knew how to let go, to enjoy themselves, how to take huge amounts of delight in everything they did, from the excitement of getting to know these crazy chariots they were riding, half or fully underwater, on the surface 1 minute, in the mud at the bottom the next, or the fun they had on the boat they lived on in your beautiful loch, Titania, affectionately known as Teats. Knowing how to let go was very important. July 42. Little has happened that I can tell you of. I was in a motorboat which sank. Too many of us wanted to go on in one trip. It just went down under us, and there were blokes laughing like mad and swimming around. 2 of us still had pipes in our mouths. Then the coxswain said, "Please, sir, I can't swim." Well, that made us laugh all the more, as he'd been doing all night for the past couple of months. Still, we shoved him on an empty petrol can, and soon we were picked up. August 42. Last night, being Saturday, I'm in no fit state to fill in a couple of pages of this size. We had a rather rough party, which finished up with a sort of horse game, where blokes on other blokes' backs charged similar couples with fell intent at 2 this morning, with most of the furniture damaged, some beyond repair. Despite the head, I started at 0900 on a really good walk, going hard over really rough country with only half an hour for grub, getting back at about tea. A short sleep, dinner, always cold and salad on a Sunday, and a game of chess. Tomorrow work, and hard work too. Hard, risky, hazardous work, but you can read about that in the history books. Some of those books question whether all their training and bravery and the terrible loss of life was justified by the results. I'm sure there were lessons to learn, but there's something else of real importance here. What they did was remarkable in human terms. There's much to be learnt from these wonderful wild boys. From their commitment, their care for each other, their ability to play, skylarking, their commanding officer called it, and their utter integrity through it all. And after it was all over, they let it go. No big deal, private. So if you hear about what they did under the water, hear also the laughter ringing across the loch this summer, and for years to come. Both are as important as each other.
Thank you, Fiona. Ben, I wondered if you can maybe come and anchor this corner, because I think it's going to take off. Yes, thank you very much for standing in at such short notice. Really appreciate that. And thank you to Penny for writing that very personal contribution. You can read more about the brave Dickie Grinland in our handout leaflet, which is available inside. Please take one of these with you. So the project history, there was quite a large detachment on shore, mainly in Kyo's, where they had a canteen just as you enter the village on the right, below the road. A few personnel were also based here at Charioteers in this former school building, which is now the Ravenspoint Centre, where they also had a workshop. There was also a large detachment on the vessel HMS Titania, which had been converted into a submarine support ship and was anchored here in Loch Erisard. What a sight it must have been, an ominous battleship grey warship, 15 metres longer than the Loch Seaforth, sitting in the middle of the loch between Kyo's and Gerivard. From accounts we know that people on each side of the loch could clearly hear all the tannoy announcements beaming out from the ship. And of course there was no publicity about the Charioteers at the time, although local people were naturally aware, and indeed I was told yesterday about local people getting cigarettes and chocolate, so they were very much mixing with the community. Donald Alistair Smith from Kyo's told me once that he remembered them running around the village in white shorts, presumably keeping fit. We also know that there was a radar unit with a spinning disc here on this headland just here. Don MacLeod, who lived across the road, used to tell us about the local Home Guard defending it overnight. I think he was one of them. From these accounts we also learned that when operations were in progress in the loch, the Home Guard used to stop all cars at Gerivard and Habost. And that was probably 1 or 2 cars a day away back then, especially with most of the men away serving in the war. You can imagine the scene, proudly holding up their wooden rifles. I'll avoid any direct comparison with a well-known TV programme. And that reminds me of another story passed down about a young Christine MacLeod, aged 14, who lived across the road here at the time. She opened the door to a man referred to by her as an admiral, possibly because of all the gold braid and possibly just an officer or captain of the ship. He asked if her father was in, and being acutely aware that information shouldn't be shared, she still blurted out, "He's away in the war." Her mother, Mary MacLeod, regularly put out a basin of eggs outside their door, which the sailors used to come and take. It would have been a nice change from the powdered eggs that would be part of their normal ration. So what was this secret project? Rather than spend time here in the wind, we have detailed much of the interesting history in a small leaflet available inside, which you can take away with you. And of course, there's a lot available on the internet as well. And there's also a slideshow on our interactive screen inside. So in summary, the Chariot was a manned torpedo which allowed 2 divers to be carried underwater by a self-propelled tube which could get close enough to enemy targets for the warhead to be detached and then detonated by timer while the Charioteers made their way back to the mother submarine. The Mark I Chariot was a 20-foot metal cylinder of about 20 inches diameter and weighing around 1.5 tons. It could travel at 2.9 knots for 6 hours, operating safely at a depth of around 20 feet, and was driven by a battery-powered electric motor. It was designed to carry 2 men, a pilot and the crewman responsible for underwater operations, and was capable of carrying a warhead containing 600 pounds explosives, which had to be unbolted from the Chariot and attached to its target. A timing device was set to trigger detonation at the required time. A later model of this had, I believe, 1,000 pounds of explosives in the warhead. So, although Loch Erised was an excellent location for this secretive work, it eventually proved to be unsuitable for the Charioteers due to the loss of buoyancy experienced in the fresh water which flowed into the loch. In August 1943, the Charioteers were therefore moved to Loch Cairnbron in Sutherland for training on larger, deeper and more heavily defended targets. The base at Cowes, which included a canteen and other new structures, were dismantled in 1943, and so ended a little known but intriguing episode in the history of lochs. Now, 80 years after the conclusion of these highly secretive military tests in Loch Erised, we are recognising their brave endeavours at last. And now to just say a few words about the memorial itself. It's a half-size model. It's 50% of the original size. It was built by Eugene Patterson, whom many of you will know from his beautiful carvings of Lewis chessmen seen here on the island, and I'm sure many go further afield. His carvings are not limited to chessmen either, with jumping salmon, seals and other beautiful pieces. We are very grateful that he took on this commission and made such a great and realistic looking replica. I haven't spotted him, but I'm hoping he is here today. So, oh, there he is. Hi, Euston. So, Euston, take a bow. You know, we applaud your excellent work. So, let's have a big cheer for Euston and his amazing work. The stone cairn beside it was built by Ian Matheson from Graver, and again a very fitting design built from cobbles from the seashore. I haven't spotted Ian either, but if he's here, I don't see him. But if you are here, Ian, well done, and a big clap for Ian as well. Our thanks to our funders, without whose support this would not have been possible. We received £8,000 from the Crown Estates Fund managed by the Coharla, our local council, and a further £2,000 from Park Community Council from the fund provided by Mooraville Community Wind Farm Trust. And thank you all for your support. That's all I have to say. I'm now going to pass on to the Lord Lieutenant of the Western Isles, Mr. Ian Macaulay, who will be saying a few words.
Thank you, Johnny. I'm Fisker Ma Harston. It is my honour to be asked to say a few words on the importance of the Comunachtrian in English historical societies and of the wider Comunachtri movement here in the Western Isles. There are around 25 commonectories across the Western Isles, from Barra and Wartasay in the south and Ness in the north, operating a museum and archive service. The first to be established was Commonectory Nish in 1997, and the latest reformed some 5 years ago in 2018. This is an impressive number, especially as they are largely volunteer-led. All do important and painstaking work to protect and preserve the history of these islands, and particularly in respect of the Gaelic language, our history, our heritage, and our culture. The list of activities that they are involved in is huge: collecting and analysing oral histories and recordings, photographs, artefacts, census data, school, parish and estate records, newspaper and other written archive material, genealogical information and records. They also promote lectures, research emigration and times of land struggles, the history of crofting and fishing, boat building, as well as publishing books and periodic magazines, undertaking detailed work on World War I, World War II, the Isle Air, and more recently, the emigration ships of Metagama and the Marloch. The list goes on. The above list gives us a clear picture of the movement that is passionate, committed, and strongly motivated. Importantly, they work closely with their communities, engaging with all generations from our primary schools to our eldest residents. The Commonectory movement in the Western Isles, working in partnership with the Corliss Museum and Archive Service, is a well-developed system that creates high-quality productions, some receiving national accreditation for their programme of events and exhibitions. Additionally, there are notable other local bodies and organisations, including Hebridean Connections, the Islands Book Trust, Angus MacLeod Archive, Shalom, Northton Heritage Trust, the Western Isles Transport Preservation Group, doing an extraordinary volume of work in their own specific areas of knowledge and expertise. The impact of the commonectories have made across the Western Isles over the years is remarkable. Each has benefited our communities enormously and in so many positive ways. They are an excellent example of the important volunteer contribution that defines our islands as they help to promote and improve the well-being of the whole community. To all commonectories across the Western Isles, thank you for your rich legacy that you have produced and collected for us, and importantly, have archived and secured for future generations to learn from and enjoy. Finally, to Park Historical Society, thank you for today's memorial event, and best wishes for your future endeavours. Moran Tang.
Thank you very much, Ian, and now hand over to Christopher.
Thank you, Donny. Good afternoon, friends. The Charioteers gave rise to so many local stories. When I was a boy, my grandfather would sometimes take me down to Chios on a sunny day. From a small summer house overlooking Tabay Island, he would describe how in 1952 a secret naval operation had moved into Loch Erisort and then a year later had slipped out again as discreetly as it had arrived. My grandfather was a naval man himself and had served with the RNVR in the First World War. And he told me that when Provost of Stornoway during the Second World War, he had visited the facility of Loch Erisort and met many of those who were training here. I remember being fascinated by the story of the Charioteers then. But of course, because the Navy had left so cleanly, there was almost no physical trace to remember them by. That was until now, exactly 80 years later. As Donny has mentioned, Penny Greenland became the inspiration for this new memorial here at Kershada. and we are all very sad that she couldn't be here. But having had her remarks read by Fiona Stokes, we are very grateful that those words can be entered into the important record of the Charioteers. The memorial, commissioned by Park Historical Society and created by the talents of Ushcin, the scaled replica of a chariot Mark I, finally provides a permanent reminder of a largely unknown chapter in our local history. It's supported by the information that the Society itself has carefully researched and is displayed. As a local resident and a member of the Society, I'm delighted to have been asked to play a very small part in today's event. So on behalf of the many guests here this afternoon, may I offer the following remarks. First, we thank the Park Historical Society under Donnie's chairmanship for commissioning this memorial in the first place, and together with all the staff here at Ravenspoint and other local supporters for facilitating today's commemorative event. And of course, we renew our thanks to Ushcin Patterson for creating this fantastic replica. We gratefully acknowledge the words of Ian Macaulay, our Lord Lieutenant, in highlighting the work of the important and often painstaking activity of the local historical societies of the Western Isles. In particular, and although she can't be with us here today, we wish to congratulate Annie McSween on being appointed MBE in the recent King's Birthday Honours. Not only has Annie been heavily involved in the Común Ecris movement, she has been a driving force by which the Park Historical Society has also benefited. And finally, may I also thank Penny Greenland, who, although she was unable to be with us here at the last minute, has, through the words read by Fiona, brought alive the experience of the Charioteers here on Loch Erisort. It would have been our privilege to have had Penny unveil the memorial this afternoon, but in her absence, Ian Macaulay, the Lord Lieutenant, has kindly agreed to do so. A fitting substitution on what is today Armed Forces Day. But before I ask him to do so, I have one final task to perform. I'm pleased to report that the work of the Park Historical Society, culminating in today's event, has not escaped the official notice of others. Indeed, I've just received the following message from the Royal Navy Submarine Services Commodore-in-Chief. That person is Prince William, now Lord of the Isles. His message from Kensington Palace reads as follows. In my capacity as Commodore-in-Chief Submarines, I congratulate the Park Historical Society upon its initiative to commemorate those engaged with the Chariot manned torpedo during the Second World War. As part of a programme initiated by officers of the Royal Navy Submarine Service, naval personnel were based in Loch Erisort in 1942, operating from HMS Titania in conditions of great secrecy, a discretion that was shared by the local community. Their purpose was to master the techniques required to deploy a weapon capable of approaching enemy shipping undetected prior to an attack. That training, including in Loch Erisort, was conducted in often very difficult sea conditions and required remarkable courage. I am delighted to learn that the Society has established a memorial to the Charioteers on the banks of Loch Erisort in Kershire. I hope that it will act as a permanent reminder of a chapter in naval history that is not widely known, while acknowledging the service and sacrifice of the naval personnel involved. And it's signed William. We will enter that message into the record of this very special occasion. So, to the business of the day, May I now invite our Lord Lieutenant in Macaulay, if you wouldn't mind progressing down to the memorial itself, and to unveil the memorial to the Loch Erisort Charioteers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian and Christopher and Fiona. You can now relax and go and have something to eat inside. Our volunteers have been busy preparing something for you, so I'm sure you'll be happy to get out of the cold. So that ends our event today. Our gazebo didn't fly away, surprisingly, still on the ground, and I'm sorry if you got very wet, but thank you all for coming today. Thank you. And I should, of course, mention that there is a leaflet inside, so please take one of these with you because it'll tell you a lot more of the detail of the actual history. Thank you.